The old billionaire had fired 12 caregivers in less than a year. But nobody knew that the 13th person who walked through his mansion doors would be the one person who could change his life. Richard Blackwood was 78 years old, extremely wealthy, seriously ill, and completely alone. His enormous mansion was filled with expensive furniture, beautiful paintings, and rooms nobody used. But there was almost no laughter. Richard spent most of his days in a wheelchair, refusing to speak to anyone unless absolutely necessary. The caregivers came with good intentions. They left exhausted. Some said he was rude. Others said he was impossible. One caregiver lasted only 3 days after Richard threw a tray of food across the room because she tried to force him to eat. His own children weren't much better. Richard had 3 grown children, but they rarely visited him. They didn't call to ask whether their father was comfortable. They didn't sit beside his bed. Instead, they sent the family lawyer. Every few days, the lawyer would arrive with a briefcase, check Richard's condition, ask the doctor about his health, and make sure everything concerning the billionaire's properties and inheritance was in order. Richard knew exactly why they came. They were waiting for him to die. One rainy afternoon, a desperate black woman named Grace arrived at the mansion for an interview. She was dressed simply, carrying one small handbag. She desperately needed the job, but there was one problem. She had a 7-year-old daughter named Lily, and she had no one to leave the child with. Richard's house manager warned her, "Mr. Blackwood doesn't tolerate children." Grace looked down at Lily. "I know, but I have no choice." She took the job, and that was the day everything began to change. That evening, Grace was cleaning the billionaire's sitting room when Lily wandered away. "Lily," Grace called, "come back here." But the little girl didn't hear her. She pushed open a large door and found an elderly man sitting alone in a wheelchair. Richard looked up. His expression immediately hardened. "Who are you?" Lily stared at him. "My name is Lily. Where is your mother?" "She is working." Richard frowned. "Then go back to her." Lily didn't move. Richard raised his voice. "I said go away." Lily blinked. Then she calmly said, "You don't have to shout." Richard stared at her. Nobody spoke to him like that. Not as employees. Not as children. Certainly not strangers. "Young lady," he said slowly, "do you know who I am?" Lily shook her head. "No." Richard was speechless. Lily looked at his wheelchair. Then she looked at his serious face. "You look angry." Richard almost laughed, but stopped himself. "I'm not angry." "You look angry." Before he could respond, Grace rushed into the room. "Lily!" She grabbed her daughter's hand. "I am so sorry, Mr. Blackwood. Please forgive her." Richard looked at the little girl, then at Grace. "Just keep her away from my room." "Yes, sir." Grace quickly led Lily away. But as they disappeared down the hallway, Richard watched the child. For the first time in months, something inside him had stirred. Not happiness. Not yet. Just curiosity. The following morning, Lily saw Richard again. She waved. Richard ignored her. The next day, she waved again. He ignored her. On the third day, she placed a small drawing on the table beside him. Richard looked at it. "What is this?" "That's you." He examined the drawing. It showed a very crooked man sitting in a wheelchair. Richard frowned. "Why did you draw me like this?" "Because that's how you look." Lily walked away. Richard stared at the drawing, and despite himself, he smiled. It was the first smile anyone in that mansion had seen from him in a very long time. And Lily didn't even notice. She was already running after her mother. But from that day on, something strange began happening. Richard started waiting for the little girl to come into the room, and neither of them realized yet that their unlikely friendship would soon change the entire Blackwood family. Something strange was happening inside Richard Blackwood's mansion. The old billionaire was changing, and the person responsible was a 7-year-old girl. Lily had no idea how powerful her presence had become. She simply treated Richard like a normal person. She didn't care about his money. She didn't care about his mansion. And she certainly wasn't afraid of his bad temper. One morning, Richard refused to eat breakfast. Grace tried everything. "Sir, please. You need to take your medication after eating." "No, just a little, sir." "I said no." Lily, who was sitting nearby, looked at the untouched plate. Then she looked at Richard. "You don't like the food?" Richard frowned. "I'm not hungry." Lily picked up a piece of toast. She took one bite. and she made a face. It's not very good. Richard stared at her. You just said it wasn't good. Yes. For the first time, Richard laughed. A real laugh. Grace stopped moving. She looked at him in disbelief. Richard quickly cleared his throat. Don't look at me like that. Grace smiled. I haven't heard you laugh in months, sir. Richard's smile disappeared. Neither have I. Days passed, then weeks. Lily started sitting beside Richard while he read. Sometimes she talked too much. Sometimes she asked questions he didn't want to answer. Sometimes she simply sat quietly and colored. And strangely, Richard didn't mind. He even began asking about her. What did you learn at school today? I learned that plants need sunlight. Richard nodded. That's true. Lily looked at him. Maybe you need sunlight too. Richard raised an eyebrow. Why? Because you stay inside all day. The old man shook his head. You're a very troublesome child. Lily smiled. You like me? Richard pretended to be offended. I never said that. But you do. Richard looked away. Perhaps she was right. As Lily became closer to him, Richard's health seemed to improve. He started eating. He started sitting outside in the garden. He even began taking short walks with assistants. The doctors were surprised. Grace was surprised. But Richard knew exactly what had changed. For the first time in years, he had someone who looked forward to seeing him. Someone who didn't want his money. Someone who didn't care about his name. Someone who simply wanted him to smile. One evening, Lily found Richard sitting alone in the garden. The sun was going down. She sat beside him. For a while, neither spoke. Then Lily looked at the enormous mansion. Mr. Richard? Yes. Why is your house always so quiet? Richard looked at her. I suppose because there's nobody here. But you have children. His expression changed. Lily continued. Why don't they come? Richard looked away. They're busy. Lily didn't believe him. Do they love you? Richard remained silent. Then Lily asked another question. Why do you always chase people away? Richard slowly turned toward her. What? You chased Mommy away when she first came. That was different. You chased 12 other people away too. Richard said nothing. Lily looked directly into his eyes. What? For several seconds, the old billionaire couldn't answer. Then Lily asked softly, Did somebody hurt you? Richard's face changed. The anger disappeared. The walls he had built around himself for years suddenly seemed much weaker. He looked toward the mansion. Then he whispered, I wasn't always alone. Lily listened. Richard told her that once. His home had been full of people. He had loved his family deeply. But something happened years ago that broke him. He lost someone he loved. And after that, he became afraid. Afraid of loving again. Afraid of losing again. So he began pushing people away before they could leave him. Lily was quiet. Then she asked, So you make people leave because you're scared they will leave you? Richard looked at her. Yes. His voice cracked. I thought if I pushed everyone away first, it wouldn't hurt when they were gone. Lily stared at him for a moment. Then she slowly stood up. She walked over to Richard, and without saying another word, she hugged him. Richard froze. His arms remained at his sides. Grace, watching from the doorway, covered her mouth. She expected Richard to push Lily away, but he didn't. Slowly, very slowly, Richard lifted his arms and hugged the little girl back. His eyes filled with tears. Lily whispered, You don't have to be alone anymore. Richard closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, the old billionaire allowed himself to cry. But neither Richard nor Grace knew that this simple hug was only the beginning. Because the next morning, Lily would discover something hidden inside the mansion that would force Richard to confront a part of his past he had spent years trying to forget. Moral lesson. Sometimes people push others away not because they don't need love, but because they are afraid of losing it. A little kindness can reach a heart that years of wealth and comfort could never reach. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness can change a life.